Working with a fantasy baseball partner. Hey, I highly recommend it. Fantasy Alarm and SiriusXM's Rick Wolf joins us on the show to talk about what makes his fantasy partnership so successful. Plus, our analysis of the Middle Infield player pool. Beat the Shift is next. Welcome to another episode of the Beat the Shift podcast. I am your host, Ariel Cohen, and with me as always, Ruvain Guy. How are you, Ruvain?
I'm doing great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing marvelous. The Trevor Bauer sweepstakes appears to almost come to an end by the time you will be listening to this. He might be a New York Met. Any thoughts about having Bauer join our boys, Ruvain?
It's very interesting that he may have the highest average annual salary per year, yet not start opening day, which is going to be very odd.
That's right. DeGrom would still be the ace and would get the number one nod on the Mets. That would be great. Look, the Mets would have, again, a pair of Cy Young Award winners at the top of their rotation. You know, last year the Mets, their offense was fantastic, and their downfall was their starting pitching, which we originally thought might have been a positive. So that'll be good to know that you have him. You got Stroman, Carrasco, Syndergaard, pretty much 4 out of the 5 pitchers who didn't pitch for the Mets last year. Pretty good, right?
Yeah, it is pretty good, but they still have to contend with the Braves.
That's true. And the rest of the NL East. Well, anyways, today we've got a great guest on here. One of the pioneers of the fantasy industry. He is half of the duo of Colton and the Wolfman from Fantasy Alarm. Welcome to the show, Rick Wolf. How are you?
Hey guys, thanks for having me on tonight. Looking forward to having some fun.
Our pleasure. Thanks for coming on. And we jump right into it on our show with our strategy section today. We're going to talk about fantasy baseball partners in the industry. Rick, you and Glenn Colton, your partner there, you do quite a few expert industry leagues, and you're known for that in the industry, and you do it quite well, winning several different labor titles and tout titles and whatnot. So we want to pick your brain on how that works, why that works. As you may know, Ruvain and I do a number of leagues together. And we've been pretty successful, so maybe we can all share with everyone the successes and maybe even some of the failures of what couldn't go wrong, what could go right and could go wrong with partners. So first of all, just a little bit of history. How did you decide to partner up with Glenn, and what do you think gives a duo an advantage over others?
All right, so Glenn and I didn't pick each other to partner with. We were thrust together. We were college dorm mates. And actually, we were trying to be the resident assistant of the same dorm. And what happened was one of us ended up being on the floor and the other one being the RA. In this case, I was the RA and Glenn stayed on the floor. And we acted as co-RAs, if you will. Because at that time, you know, in the 80s, it was about throwing parties. It was not about enforcing rules. I was literally the social director for Binghamton College at the time. And so it was pretty easy for me to figure out how to throw parties. And Glenn was one of the few people on campus who had a car. And so he made it easy for us to be able to get places to pick up kegs and do the important things. And so Glenn and I were party pals. We set up the parties and we ran them for our dorm. And you know, Glenn was a straight A student and I was, let's say, not a straight A student. You know, I'm a solid C student. I would be a great president of the United States. So we were thrust together as dorm mates, and we played poker every Friday night, and we talked baseball constantly, and we stayed in touch afterwards when he went to law school, and I went on to IBM, and then of course to Sportsline, which became CBSSports.com. So in '98, I decided that I wanted to be in the experts leagues, even though I had been playing rotisserie baseball for 10 years, but I wasn't good. Honestly, I really was not good at all. So we bought a sponsorship, CBS Sportsline, bought a sponsorship of John Hunt's column and anything that had John Hunt on it or in it. So guess what? The labor leagues had John Hunt running them. So as part of the sponsorship, they were required to put somebody from CBS Sports into the league. So I did not earn my way into labor. I bought my way into labor. So we had $150,000 sponsorship, which included that. We live broadcasted across AOL Live, which actually got the first exposure for the labor league in 1998, and I drafted with somebody there. I finished it dead last in 1998. So I said, well, this is embarrassing. I can't do this anymore. I started reading everything I possibly could. I had been reading Chandler's books since the beginning of time, since they first came out in '86. But I started reading everybody else and started trying to figure it out. And I started studying to try and figure it out. So in '99 I finished third, and in 2000 I finished second, and in 2001 I finished third. And Glenn and I were having drinks over the holidays. And I was like, I'm coming up, to go to labor again. What do I have to do? He goes, you got to add me. That's why you're not winning. So added Glenn before the 2002 season, and then we won back-to-back labor AL titles in 2002 and 2003. So that's it. It's all happened sort of by almost accident. I'm not an expert. I'm not Patton or Chandler or Zola at the time, and but CBS wants to bring the labor and USA Today and wants to have fantasy be more popular. So we spend a lot of money marketing against it. And one of those ways is buying an entry into the labor league.
Oh, wow. That's a great story there. Unbelievable.
I think I qualify now, but I did not qualify in '98.
Right.
I did not deserve to be there.
All right. Well, certainly you deserve to be there now with all your accolades and all the titles here. So, as far as the partnership itself, how does Rick Wolf become Colton the Wolfman and succeed? What does the partnership? What does the complement of the two of you bring that just one doesn't?
Well, I'm not sure whether you know this or not, but Glenn was the federal prosecutor at the time. He was in the Southern District of New York. He was basically, the characters you see on Billions, right? Your Brian or, the characters who report to Chuck Rhodes, okay? Reporting to first Janet Reno and then, of course, to James Comey. He's a federal prosecutor. He's got all these rules, all this stuff going on. And so he says, well, how are we going to do this? And I'm like, well, you're the rules guy. Figure it out. So we put a framework together for ideas and concepts that we had and how we would use those in order to win. And at the time, Ron Chandler had his ALIMA system. And so we were, and other people had their acronyms. And we're like, we need an acronym for it, right? So Glenn said, well, we should call it SMART. And I think he was kind of like serious because we're going to make a smart system. But I thought it was a really, really funny joke, right? The dumb guy who finished last in his first labor brings somebody on and then they create the SMART system. I mean, it's just kind of funny. So we created a set of rules that we lived by, and we then backfilled them into the acronym after that. So, and of course, I don't know whether you guys know what those components are, but the SMART system stands for scarcity, management, anchors, relievers, and team. So, and then, our rules fit into that. And then over the years since then, we've created a set of rules of engagement, which are things that we've kind of figured out. The one that we just added this year is that players who hit their 25th year season, that's when the home runs come. So when you're 24 and you've hit 22 or 23 home runs in that year, you're going to hit 35 the next year. And we've watched that, and we did some analysis on that to make sure that those are the trends. And if you take a look back at the last 3 years, you'll see that those players who, when they hit 25, those are the guys who are top 10 last year, the year before that, and the year before that. You'll see 3 to 4 guys who had their 25th year season who just popped into the top 10 for the first time. So, we add corollaries all the time, and we've been honing the system on how we can, because he has a heavy day job, and I'm running the business side and the technology side of most companies. I'm not an analyst, not like you guys. We have to have a system that can allow us to cut down the number of players that we have to study. So that's why the SMART system came into being.
Very interesting. Well, let's go to Ruvain here. You've worked with me for, a large number of years as well. I can't say as long as Rick has, but what do you think are the highlights of why we work as a partnership and how the two of us are better than anyone individually?
Well, first of all, you have a second set of eyes and ears paying attention to everything. What you may see in a room when there's a draft going on, I may not see, and vice versa. So we're able to see twice of what's going on. Plus, you're the math guy. You are definitely the math guy, way above a lot of the stuff you say is way above my head. I'm more the injury guy. So we have the yin and the yang. We're working together, but we're also setting it up so that we're able to meld as one. Basically, we agree on the most part for most players, but there are some players we don't agree upon, and when we do that, that's when we do our own personal deep dives for each players, and that's when we work on it. Also, we've been together for so long, we don't get offended by each other's. Well, if we say something negative about each other, so we get along real well. I mean, we've known each other since high school. You were in my brother's high school class, and I've known you since then. And we've been doing leagues for about 15, almost 15 years, and we know how each other operates. You're the computer guy. I'm the paper and pencil guy. We just get together, and we were able to work together and just figure it. We just at the end of the day, we just figure it out. I mean, there's no other way of just saying it. Just the way there's a thing. You know, if you have a good partner, if it just works. If there are partnerships that just don't work, but you have to know when it does work, and ours does work.
Right. So, Rick, what are some of the disadvantages of having a partner, and how might you overcome them?
So I want to go back to what your partner just
Please.
said, because it basically defines Colton the Wolfman pretty much exactly. Now I'm not. I mean, I have a BS in mathematics and BS computer science, but I don't run algorithms.
Same here, by the way. Same here.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah.
I don't run algorithms or anything like that, but I do manage all the spreadsheets. I do dive into the numbers a little bit more than Glenn does, and Glenn's a soft data guy. I also watch a lot. I'm pretty sure I watch a lot more games than he does because I watch pretty much a late game almost every night. So, and I watch a lot of the Met games like I'm sure you guys do. But he watches every Yankee game, but that's pretty much it. So he's a soft data guy, and I'm kind of the numbers guy. I wouldn't call it math guy, because I'm not doing what you do. I mean, you're doing quantum physics on figuring things out. I'm just kind of looking for trends. And then we put those two things together, and that's how it works. Like I'll say, oh, I really like so and so this year, and he'll go 2 off-season surgeries. I'm like, damn, I didn't know that. So he does complete that, similar to, it seems like, what your partnership is.
Oh yeah, I mean that exact kind of phrase happens all the time. Ruvain's what I think what makes us work together is that Ruvain and I have very different qualities and very different advantages to what we do. He's thinking of the injury side. If we're thinking of how many at bats a guy is a guy going to get, is the ATC projection that we see too high or too low. He's always thinking about the injury side, the lineup side, and I'm thinking of the mathematical side of, the trend and this. And because we have different insights, we both can come at from different viewpoints, and that adds to the total. And of course, if any of us have a stronger opinion, we're good enough partners that we can let whatever our pre-assessments of things override. If Ruvain has a strong opinion about something, I'll slow down in my approach and I'll take over his more. I rarely find instances where I'm just so opposed to Ruvain on a player that we can't find common ground. We can always find something. Maybe I'll go up a little bit, he'll go down on value. I'll say, let's take him in a draft, let's take him in an auction, that kind of thing. But there's always a way that we can compromise. But it comes from the different viewpoints, and I think that's really what it is. It's the ability to communicate, but the ability to see different points is what I think.
Yeah, and so let me ask you a quick question about that. So is Ruvain better at pitchers and you're better at hitters?
I don't know.
No, I don't think so. I think we're both good at each. Sometimes, some seasons we feel we're better at pitchers. Like 5 years ago, I think we nailed the pitchers. We were very good at pitchers, but the whole market has changed. So I don't know if we can say that we're good at pitchers anymore, just because the way the market's changed. It's not that one person is better than the other one in another area. I think we just, we have a little of each. I'm the person that every morning when I was younger, I got the newspaper, I looked at the box scores, I was following the numbers, I was getting the baseball cards, looking at the back of the baseball cards. But I also had a math tutor in high school, so I wasn't the math guy, but I knew the numbers. I was an encyclopedia. I can tell you when I was in 11th grade, I was able to tell you every player on the Angels, and I live in New York, and and in 11th grade back then, that's not normal. That's not what a normal 11th grader would do. So I have that. Ariel Moore has the math stuff when it comes to trends and finding the trends for certain pitchers or hitters. That's what he's better at.
Yeah, I mean, like this year, we've come up with the ATC projections have interprojection volatility, which you'll see on Fangraphs shortly with a nice research article on why you might be interested in that. But I'll come up with this kind of thing. Just the ATC process of how to weight things and regressions. That's my deal with the math side. But of course, I'll listen to Ruvain about a specific player. Just because the ATC projections say something, we may not agree with it, and we'll do some. Not battling, we'll do some discussion and we go through every single player and we talk about is the ATC projection high, low, do we agree, do we not have a strong opinion, take the ATC projections word for word. So it's just about working with each other. Let's talk a little bit about splitting up tasks. So I always talk about during an auction with me and Ruvain, we each have very specific tasks that were at hand. Ruvain keeps track of the closers. Ruvain is the one who suggests to me who should I nominate. He's looking at players that we think are economically going to be sound to nominate first. And we'll talk a little bit about this later in one of our episodes in terms of auction nominations, but it's important what order players come up in, and Ruvain keeps track of that. I'm keeping track of the statistical balance. I'm keeping track of what players would balance our categories more, which have lower variance, and who and how the price is dynamically select, all the math things. In an auction live, I'm the one doing the bidding. I'm the one saying it out loud. When we do it on a computer, Ruvain's the one doing the bidding. So we each have very specific tasks, and we don't have to talk about it beforehand. We know each other what to do. Do you have that with Glenn, and what would those be?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a pretty similar process. So, what we do is we do our own studying in separately. And he writes copious notes by hand. And I plug things into the computer in different ways. And then we get together before we do our first draft of the season, and we go over every player. We go every relevant player we go over completely. But remember, our smart system makes us have to discount many of them. So when we're going to be discounting somebody because of one of the smart system rules, and we set a dollar value on every single player for AL only and for mixed. When we're setting those dollar values, when we're deciding what they are, the rules of engagement allow us to not talk a lot about players we're discounting. We discount them, we give them a discounted number, and we move along because we know we're not getting
right,
them.
right,
So
right.
it allows us to spend less time on players that we're not going to get, and then come out with a targeted pool that's about 35 to 40% of the overall player pool. So we will have much less players to have that we're going to be involved in, depending on each draft, right? Then when we get together before each draft, depending on the strategy or the people that we're playing against or the types of rules that exist within that particular league, we'll adjust that. But generally, it only means adding 10 players in or taking 10 players out from the pool that we've created.
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, we do a similar thing in that, on this show, we don't talk about every shortstop. We just look at the players that ATC sees as a potential bargain. If ATC is looking at so far below the market value, we don't have to discuss it. There's no point. We're never going to buy that player, right? You want to use your time wisely. And we'll talk a little bit about time management a little bit later in the show. Ruvain, anything to add in terms of the tasks we split up to that discussion?
Well, we actually do categories. Like I'll look at you'll tell me it's time to look at the closer list, and I go through the closer list which closers I think we should target. I'll go over the injury stuff. I'll also do some of the prospect stuff. You're more the guy looking for trends in the market, looking to see, who's having a good spring training, that type of thing. And we just put it together and we go over, just like you do, we go over every single player. We go every single player, going through the ATC projections and seeing what looks right, what doesn't look right, why it doesn't look right, and then we jump into each one and we see whether or not they're a bargain. And by the time the drafting season starts, we should know every single player who is eligible, and we don't keep to that, just like you said, 35%. We look at everybody. There's a chance that we can own every single player. There's some players are higher on than others, but we don't go into a thing saying we have to have this guy or we have to have this guy. We have a group of players. We say this is the pool, but we're still willing to go out of that and to break the comfort level, because we'll have different plans set up for the draft. Like we'll say, if we get this guy at a good price, oh, you know what, let's we'll go into this direction to change the team. So we have to have different types of plans going into each draft.
Okay, and that's something we've changed just pretty recently. We changed back in 2014, I think, or 15. And we've been winning more championships because of it. Is we are now specifically figuring out who the exact targets of the players that we absolutely think that have the most upside, and it's all about upside. You need to have some players you're going to bank stats for, but bank them at either a bargain or at their regular price. But for guys that we think it's their breakout year, and again, that 25-year-old thing has really hit, and Glenn is very good at figuring out which pitchers are going to pop. We just go get them now. And if it costs us $5 extra, $8, $10 extra, we don't care. We just go get the guys we know, or that from our experience are the guys who are going to explode, and we just go get them. And that just happened in the last 5 or 6 years that we started doing that, instead of being slaves to, oh, did we get a bargain on that guy or did we get a bargain on that guy? No, we're going to go get that guy because he fits into the strategy that we built for this particular competition.
Very interesting, because we don't do that. We're more we're not tied 100% to the values, but we're much more towards that. We're very aware of what our figures say, and we aren't willing to spend $5-6 over just because we like somebody. I don't like anybody. I like pairs of players that I think we need X or Y or Z to fit our risk component makeup, that kind of thing. It's a risk management thing. I don't fall in love with any players. Now, Ruvain touched on what we split up in terms of the preseason, and I touched on what we split up in terms of the actual draft, but also during the season, we have tasks as well. So some people with Fab, some partners, it's one or the other, or they rotate. Like, I'll do it this week, you do it this week. Ruvain and I discuss Fab every single week. We go over exactly the Fab list we want to do. Ruvain keeps up a little bit more on the news. I'll keep a little bit more up on the numbers, the trends, who's hot, and, K minus BB, that kind of thing. Do you guys have any tasks that you split up in the middle of the season?
Yeah, well, I mean, during the draft, we certainly split things up. He does all the bidding always. Why would you have a federal prosecutor who's a litigator who knows how to think on his feet fast and not use that strength?
Sure.
And then
Makes
I
sense.
figure out what strategies are going on, because I really feel like that's a real strength of mine. Like, if I can see, like, for instance, I believe that we won tout the first time, for the first AL tout, because I recognize it's an OBP league. I recognized that 2 teams were dumping OBP. So we just forced, when one of them was out, on those players to go another dollar, and we squeezed dollars out of them until, and we made sure we OBP protected, and then we won OBP easily, and then, dominated the offensive categories in order to be able to win. But that's something in draft we literally noticed and changed our strategy completely. So, I like to do that part. Glenn does all the bidding. He figures out all that stuff. He does a lot of the end game. Like, we'll have $20 pitchers, and he'll decide which order they come out in. And I just don't keep score on that. Like, I'll be like, I like a guy better. He'll usually point to 2 with his fingers, this one or this one, and I'll go that one. But he's not. I'm not picking from the whole list. He's usually at the end. In the end game, he's much better at the pitchers. So I just don't keep score about that and say, great. In season, we have. You're either gonna love this or hate this because it's hilarious. We compete for who's gonna go first, and whoever's day job frees up early enough for them to go get it before on the weekend, because we both work weekends pretty much. We go do the first run at it. And then we send them one at a time. We'll send one email for each league. And we have usually between 8 and 11 leagues in baseball and in football. And so once you start, it's like, oh crap, I'm going to go to the other end of the list and start. And so because I don't want to be left out, but every once in a while, Glenn will send all the first shots, or I will send all the first shots, because just our day frees up. But after the first shot, then I have a list to look at. I know what he likes. I go look at it myself. I change the list. I send it back to him. And usually every league is 3 to 4 revisions. And if it gets to a fourth one, it's usually let's talk live.
Right.
And then we talk live about whichever ones we couldn't figure out in email. We figure out an email. Whoever writes the last one puts in the transactions.
Wow.
So it's very competitive, and intentionally competitive, because that makes it fun, right? And part of our friendship is how competitive we are. I'll try to stick it to him on the air. I don't know if you notice, I stick it to him intentionally about things that he makes mistakes about, because I know how perfect he likes to be. And he sticks it to me, whenever I make a joke that's not funny. So, because he knows I'm trying to be funny. So we're just constantly sticking it to each other in the same way, doing our transaction. It just makes everything more fun. Everything we do is actually more fun. Like when we're at the draft, when he's got a player that I like and he looks over to me and I give him a hand signal to go up another one, he'll look at me like, really? And then he'll go up one. So
Interesting.
We're just having fun.
And it's funny because I find that I don't do that with Ruvain. I find that I don't have a competitive nature against him or so. That we're just doing it together, and maybe it's also because. It's interesting for me to hear that your on-air personality matches what you do offline. I would think maybe, because you're on the radio, that you might want to, show that kind of personality, and maybe it isn't what you would do in person. But that's interesting to hear. I don't find that I have that with you, Ruvain. Do you agree?
But there are some times when you pick a player and you bid on somebody, and I said, no, don't do that. We don't want this guy. And I'm like, why are you doing that? And I'm like, and you know what? We make up for it because you're not picking a guy that we don't want most of the time. Right. Sometimes you put out a bid, then we get stuck with someone, but that rarely happens. But there's one thing that I always preach at every single draft. What do we need more of? We need more power. You seem to always like to get the guys that have the stolen bases. I always keep saying, remember, don't forget the power. We need the power. I remember a couple of years ago, we wanted Rhys Hoskins. I said, we have to have him. We have to have him. We have to have him. We ended up losing him, but we got 2 other small power guys, so it made up for it. But still, there's some certain mantras that we say to each other. Say every day, every draft, we say the exact same things, and we're used to it already.
Yep, that's true. That's true. One thing I find, though, Rick, that when you have a partner, trading is a little bit tougher because if a trade comes in to me and Ruvain, I want us both to like the trade. There might be some trades that I would do on my own, and there might be some trades that Ruvain would do on his own. But for me, it's a veto scenario. If either one of us doesn't like the trade, we don't do it. So I think trading becomes a little bit harder, or there'll be less a frequent number of trades. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, I mean, and the way trades generally work for us, because Glenn is not much for trading, and he's also pretty tight on what he thinks we should and shouldn't accept, right? So generally, when we're looking for something, and I'll give you here's a good example. We were pretty far behind in pitching, and we were winning in all the offensive categories in Labor NL, and we were in 2015, I think, and we needed to really make a jump. So I went to Glenn and I did some math and showed him that the math would work, and we did have a chance to make up like 13 or 14 points overall by dumping a whole bunch of power and turning it into Clayton Kershaw and I forget who the other big stud pitcher was, but we'd have to trade all of our significant power to do it. So he says, all right, well, go tell me what you mean. And so I put together a bunch of trades that I thought were good, and he sent them over. And then we did the math to make sure it would work out. And then we went to the guys and offered the trades. And they didn't accept them at first, and then we added more, and we maneuvered around until we got them. And those trades ended up with us in the last week actually chasing a chance to win. And we lost by 2 stolen bases from Jake Lamb in the last weekend to Lenny Melnick.
Oh man!
So Yeah, just a guy who doesn't run stole 2 bases.
Speedster
Um,
Jake Lamb. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. The lamb beat the wolf. There you go.
Yeah.
So, but that's how it works for us. I basically do kind of all of the. Glenn says, "Hey, we got to trade because we need this," and then I go figure out the what. I give it back to him. He goes, "Nah," and he kind of
Right.
maneuvers it around a little bit, and then we make the offers.
Right. Very interesting. I want to talk a
And
little
he
bit.
always gets something else at the end. Like he goes, you know what? He's got this guy on, and he won't be able to bring him back up because he has to activate him this week, and he's got an extra roster spot. So why don't we take whoever he's dropping? And then we end up with the player who's useful to us.
Very sneaky.
So he always finds that last little thing, which I don't look for when I'm making a trade. I'm like, all right, let's get it done. But those little things help. That extra
Right.
save, that extra 2 steals. Those things win us championships where I'm not squeezing out the last player, and the opponent doesn't mind because they were dropping him anyway.
Right, right. You're basically determining whether the trade is good, and he's trying to get the best trade by just throwing, give me the extra couple of dimes and nickels, and just because I want them. That's great. I want to talk a bit about time management. There's a lot that you can study up on. You can talk about players. You can talk about learning prospects, valuation. You can study your other opponents. That's something that I do. You can play mock drafts. Preseason, what do you think is something that the common fantasy player who's listening to this show might benefit to do a little bit more of that they wouldn't think of, and maybe something that they might not need to do enough that they can maybe prioritize something else with their time?
Well, first of all, I may play for we've been lucky enough to win championships, but I play for fun, right? So when I find a storyline or something that's interesting or a player that I think might jump for a reason, those are I kind of want to have those players because it's fun, right? So I think for most people you shouldn't take the fun out of it. And then also, find a system that works for you. It doesn't have to be the smart system. It can be whatever system you want, but something that allows you to not have to analyze every single player. Because if you analyze in detail every single player, I think it clouds your head. If you have a distinct set of players, these are the 30 players, that I'm going to have. We literally, when we go to a Labor AL or a Labor NL draft, before it, I write in a team sheet and I write all the players in that we're going to have. And I usually get between 10 and 12 out of the 23 because we know we're dedicated to these players and we know they're on our list and we know they have the most upside. We know they're the right age. They know they fit into all the smart system. So I would say make up your rules, whatever they are, and and stick with them. And if you're playing with a partner, don't ever leave your wingman. Keep
Right.
to those rules. If Glenn is about to break one of those rules, like every time we lose, it's always because we break one of these rules, right? Accidentally, I say, yeah, go for him, and then we go, oh my God, we just filled the second closer.
Right.
When we break the rules, that's when we lose. So keeping your partner honest with the rules that you create is the biggest lesson for folks. I mean, you guys have a set of rules, you just don't know what they are. If you do, you should write them down and give them a dumb acronym.
Well,
Maybe DUMB to make fun of us.
That's smart. Yeah, that's smart.
that is a smart way to think about it.
Or smarter. Just call it the smarter system.
We do have the ATC projection system, which Fantasy Pros ranked as the #1 projection system in fantasy baseball, and Fantasy
But
Pros.
that acronym is your initials, man.
No, it's the average total cost projection system. So there you go.
We tried to think of a better name, but that's what came out.
Yeah,
We're not creative. That's all.
Yeah, a lot of people in high school called me ATC, so I figured let's just continue that, and there we go. And hey, I'm lucky enough that a lot of people do use it, and you should, because it's a great base for anybody who's just starting. Why not start with the average of all projections? It's the smart average of all projections. There you go. I got smart right in there.
Well played, Mauer. Well played.
Thank you very much. So today is our Middle Infield podcast, And in our ATC player discussion, as I said earlier, we don't talk about every single middle infielder. We highlight a couple of middle infielders that ATC brings up currently as a potential bargain according to values versus what the market might perceive. We may agree with it, we may not agree with it, but we're here to talk a little bit about the players. First of all, before we talk about any players, Rick, I want to get your take on the player pool in general. There's two things I've noticed about middle infield. Number one is that it seems to be a little bit more expensive than what my values calculated with my auction prices tend to be. And two, I've also noticed that stolen bases are sometimes a good place to find stolen bases are the middle infield. You're really not going to get anything other than middle infield or outfield, so you need to count on some stolen base players there. Do you agree with those two assertions, I should say, of the player pool for the middle infield?
Yeah, well, I mean, think about it, right? So generally, first baseman and third baseman and catchers don't run a lot. So you're going to have to get it from the middle infield or the outfield. So if you and generally what we do is we have targets for how we're going to fill scarce positions. And now in this case, I don't think shortstop is scarce. I think shortstop is pretty deep. Yeah, very deep.
Very,
But
actually.
yeah, very deep. But second base maybe not as deep, but still I think pretty deep. So you don't need to get stolen bases from the middle infield if you get them someplace else. But if you don't, you better get the guys who hit for power. And one of the things in the smart system is get your stolen bases across the board. So better to get a guy who's 20 25 home runs and 15 steals than a guy who's 40 home runs and 0 steals. So try and get steals across the board, because especially for those last $1 players or $2 players, you can almost always find a guy who's going to hit 15 to 20 home runs or 15 to 25 home runs now, and for real cheap. So make sure you get your stolen bases across the board. But I don't think you need to get them here. I think 9 drafts out of 10, you're going to get them in the middle infield. But I don't think you need to.
Okay, so you're not intentionally looking, and you won't be buying Adalberto Mondesi, apparently. Ruvain, your thoughts on the story here?
I think we need to go for steals here in the middle infield. This is exactly where you should be spending your money. I think you even should pay a little bit more than what the premium is, just because these are where your main stolen base guys are. But you mentioned the power. You can get the counting stats here. 15 players who played 60 games last year were in the middle infield. That include Machado, Swanson, Didi, Lindor, Merrifield, and 5 out of 15 of those players played actually 59 games. So there's so many players playing so many games from middle infield that you can just get so many counting stats from the middle infield. It just so happens that the faster guys are there. The corner infield you're not going to get much steals from the corner infield. The corner infield, you're not going to get much. The outfield, of course, you're going to get some here and there as well. The catchers don't really steal much unless you have JT Realmuto, who throw in like 8 or 9, but that's it. But the middle infield is where you get the stolen bases, and I think you have to have at least one middle infielder that steals 20 plus bases. That's my opinion.
Interesting there. Let's talk about some of these middle infielders. The first one that comes up to me is somebody that I think is pretty undervalued. His name is Xander Bogaerts. Xander Bogaerts, year after year, contributes value. I'm going to read you some of his prior his prior final rotisserie values in a 15-team 5x5 format: 22, 24, 12, 22, 31, 25. That is amazingly consistent, and consistency matters when you're picking somebody in the first 3 rounds. He's going in the middle of the 3rd round. He's somebody that is a 5-category contributor from a Z-score perspective, so we're talking standard deviations above the average player pool. He's at least 2/3 of a standard deviation above. And other than stolen bases, he's pretty much almost a point, almost 1 standard deviation above. He's extremely well-rounded. That's something you want out of your first couple of rounds. His batting average is going to be fantastically high. He's got an 18% strikeout rate, which means that he's not going to drop. His lowest batting average in the last couple of years has been 273. He's a lifetime almost 290 hitter. The last couple of years, he's picked up the power. He's now hitting more homers per fly balls. This is somebody that I would take over the likes of Francisco Lindor. I'm very high on Xander Bogaerts this year, and so I agree with the ATC projections. Rick, your thoughts on Bogaerts?
Yeah, and so well, a couple interesting things there. Well, the most important thing that Bogarts gives you that a lot of middle infielders don't is he's going to give you the counting numbers. He could have 100. Probably have 95 100. With the 100 RBIs, 30 home runs or so. 300 batting average. So he protects you all the way around the place, but he doesn't have the upside, and you're going to have to pay, a premium price for him. You're going to pay $30 for him. So the question is it better to get a guy who has bankable stats like that, or is it better to get guys who have upside, and then you pick up the upside for free. You buy them at the price that they're supposed to perform at, and you get the upside for free. So, Xander Bogaerts is somebody that is a guy I pretty much don't ever own because the upside isn't there and somebody pays full price for him. So I only own him if I can get a discount on him somehow.
Wow, it's very interesting because my thought that in the third round, I'm not looking for upside. I'm looking for a very high floor. I'm looking for somebody who has consistency. And when I want to have upside, we're talking in the mid to later rounds, in the early to mid, to even the mid rounds. I don't need to get upside. I just need to get enough of a base floor so that when I have somebody who I pick up late or in the middle, or somebody off of waiver wires who can put me over the top, that will get me there so long as I have enough of a stat base there. I can't see Xander Bogaerts dropping below, and I agree with your homers and with your runs and RBIs. He's averaged over the last 6 years 95 runs and 90 RBIs. So I'm not sure what kind of upside what kind of upside do you require from a third round player there that makes you pass on Bogaerts?
I didn't say I was going to pass on him.
Oh, okay,
okay.
okay.
I said and by the way, in a draft, when it comes around and he's the best player available, then yes, I'm taking him.
Sure,
but
okay.
For the most part, in an auction, what happens is he's not the guy I'm targeting, and like I told you, I target players and then go buy them, or we target players and go buy them. Sorry, Glenn. So Bogarts probably isn't a target because the guys I'm targeting are guys who have upside. They're generally guys who are between the ages of 23 and 26. And he's a bit older than that.
28.
He'll be 28. So he's right on the cusp there. But you can guarantee those numbers. I mean, you can lock those in. And so there's something to be said for that too, right? The security of having an anchor tenant. It depends on who your other players are, right? So at that moment, but for me, I'm targeting upside with every time I pick, every time I spend money, I'm targeting upside. Does it work all the time? No. Sometimes I finish last, but I'd rather be last and first than third and third.
We'll go to Ruben in a second, but just to point out another difference I have between you, because it's good to see different opinions. The fact that he is a stable player makes me want to pay $1 more for him. Earlier you said that you will only take him at a bargain. My risk-adjusted price, when we're talking about a risk, he is little risk. So I'd be willing to pay even $1 over his price to bank those stats. Very different viewpoints. Ruben, your thoughts on Bogaerts?
I actually think that there's going to be a little bit recency bias, and people think that he didn't have that great of a year. If you look at his overall numbers, they weren't at the same level that he was at before. This first half of the season last year, which was the first 28 games, he had 6 home runs, 17 RBIs, 271 average, 2 stolen bases. The second half, he had 5 homers, 11 RBIs, 6 stolen bases, and a 327 average. Some people only may remember the beginning of the year, so you want to look for some upside. People may be thinking, oh, wait, what if he reverts back to what he did in the beginning of last year and not the second half of last year? And if they think that, then that's when you can jump in and possibly get him for a discount.
I was going to say, just don't get me wrong. I mean, there's only probably 3 better players in the middle infield, than him. But when you have a strategy where you're spending money in different areas and you're spending money on the upside of, a Ronald Acuna or someone who's going to have bankable stats but also have upside. Even a Fernando Tatis Jr. or a Trevor Story or a Trey Turner. Those guys I think more valuable. Nobody else more valuable than that. And so if the spot comes and I'm looking for a middle infielder and those guys are all gone, then Bogarts is rostered.
Right. Seems like you'll more likely take him in a draft than an auction
Yeah,
I'm probably indifferent.
100%.
Right. I'm indifferent right now to him. Obviously, if the spot comes up, then you're gonna grab him or not in the draft. Auction, I might be tilting a little bit more towards him because I just think that it sets a very good base and not a ridiculous price for a third round type player in an auction. Let's talk about Dansby Swanson. He's somebody who bursted on the scene, and he's been piling it up. His homers have been increasing every year. He had some incredible halves. Last year, he had 10 home runs, 5 stolen bases, 274 average. His runs were on the pace of 132 runs as the Braves were starting to bat him first in an incredibly solid lineup with MVP Freddie Freeman. Is Swanson somebody that has upside for you that you'd be considering, Rick?
100%. Right age. Got the eye was better last year. He started to take more walks. He's a guy that we were targeting. He we play a lot of best balls. I don't know about you guys, but I draft a lot preseason so that I can. I find that it gives me study time. When we're drafting, I have nothing else to do but look at information and stuff. So it sort of forces me to have study time. And Swanson was going undrafted in a lot of these, last year and during the pandemic. It was crazy to me. And so we would just pick him up in the last round or pick him up for $1 at the very end. And to me, that was just crazy. All the right things were there. All the metrics looked right. And he was a guy that everybody should have been targeting. And I think the upside is there. 30 home run, 15 steals, 260 is not out of the question.
I can see why you go for upside if you're playing a lot of best balls, because best ball is a format that you want to do that, and Xander Bogaerts would not be a target of mine in the best ball format because you're looking for guys with extreme upside. So I see where that mentality comes in. Ruvain, before my thoughts, what do you think of the Braves shortstop?
I think that one thing that was great about him last year was that he actually was healthy. He played every game last year, and that's something that he's been missing. He's always been dinged up, missed some time. That may play into why he didn't quote unquote break out yet. The two things that bother me a little bit is that he had a career high in BABIP last year. He was very lucky last year, so I'm a little nervous about that average. I don't think that average is 100% for real, but he was on pace for 23 homers and 12 stolen bases, which is the exact mix that you want from a middle infielder.
Yeah, my only issue with him is the batting average, and if you look at his strikeout rate, it is a little bit on the high side. It is not anywhere near what you want to be for a good average. I'm not going to say he's a batting average drain, but I wouldn't be surprised if he hits low 250s, which he's done every single year or lower other than this past year. But everything else is for real. And he's he's above average of the player pool in every single statistic except for the batting average. So to me, I love him, and for all the reasons that everybody has said so far. His StatCast numbers are increasing every year. It looks great. Listen, he was a top prospect, and sometimes it takes a few years for a prospect to go. And as Ruvain said, look at his injury history. That might explain some of the early non-success. And because he's been healthy, now you've seen it. This is definitely a guy that could break out even further. Let's go to Marcus Semien, who ATC projects as another bargain. Now, I should say that ATC, what you see online, is pre the signing by the Blue Jays. It takes about 7 to 10 days for a bunch of the other projection systems to reassess Semien, so you won't get the true update of Semien in terms of ATC for another week or so. But even for now, and I can't imagine it's going to get worse. Homers have to go up, right? If you're out of Oakland to Toronto, it's going to go up. Better lineup, you probably get more RBIs and so on and so forth. What he's doing now is pretty good. He was amazing in 2019. Little bit of a down year, and this is the potential rebound. Regression goes both ways. Do you think that Marcus Semien is somebody that you might be targeting, Rick?
Well, I had Simeon for a number of years in one of my keeper leagues. Actually, I lose him this year. I won't be able to keep him for a fourth year, but he's going to be 30, or maybe he turns 31. I think it's late September or October. He turns 31. And that age is a thing. But what a lineup! If it's Springer, Simeon, Bichette, and then either Guerrero or Hernandez probably, then Biggio and Gurriel in whatever order you want him in, and then either Grichuk or Telez, depending on who's pitching. And then the catcher last. I mean, this is a monster lineup. So, I really think that, and he does all the little things. So I think he could really do some damage. Probably a 340 OBP guy. So he knows how to take his walks, and he could steal 12 to 15 bases because they'll probably run more, especially with a patient hitter like Bichette behind him. I think a lot of things are good in place there, but the age thing is the thing that matters to me, bothers me the most, and I think that curbs the upside just a tiny bit for me.
Right, no doubt, no doubt. Yeah, I agree with everything you said there. His walk rate is a solid 11%. Strikeout rate is actually pretty good at 20%, which means that his batting average, I think, has upside. ATC has him at 254. I think he'll beat that. The Jays, they steal bases. You're gonna
They
see
run.
they run. You're gonna see him steal the 11 stolen bases ATC has. I think he can beat that. And the runs and RBIs are there. Do you think it matters, Rick, whether he is batting second or batting sixth, seventh, depending upon what they do with Biggio versus him? Does that make a big difference to you?
I don't think so. And the only reason obviously he's going to lose some at bats, so yes, it does matter a little bit. But in this lineup, I think any part of the lineup could be hot on any given night. Depending on who's throwing. The younger hitters later in the lineup there, Guerrero, Biggio, Gurriel. You have a fastball pitcher. Those guys, that part of the lineup is going to dominate. Telez crushes fastballs too, so righty fastball guys. They're going to have a tough time with that part of the lineup. You have your more sophisticated pitchers. They're going to have a tougher time with the more experienced Springer and Simeon at the top of the lineup. So I think it depends on who's pitching, which side of the lineup is going to dominate. But this goes all the way. These are great players all the way through the lineup.
Right. Anything to add, Ruve?
Yeah, a couple of things. First of all, Marcus Simeon, he's been known to have one good year, two okay years. One good year, two okay years. If you look at it, and his floor for the okay years is about 15 homers and 10 stolen bases, which is still pretty good. Now, he's moving to Toronto, which is a great thing. His home run to fly ball rate dropped last year, and his hard hit rate dropped a little bit, but his launch angle went up, and he was unlucky last year. He had a career low in BABIP last year, so his average will rebound a little bit. And in that lineup, getting out of Oakland, having a little bit more power, especially if I don't know where they're going to play yet, but if they're going to play in Florida or they're playing in Buffalo, wherever they play, he's going to hit a lot more out. It's a lot less spacious than the Oakland Coliseum.
There's a pair of players that have a very similar profile, sort of similar ADP. They're being picked in the NFBC right now within a round. That's Jorge Polanco of the Twins and Gene Segura of the Phillies. Polanco probably will be moved off of shortstop with the signing of Andrelton Simmons. So the question is, where is he going to play? They also have Luis Arias. Is somebody going to sit? I'm not sure. Gene Segura, he's probably penciled in for most of the stuff at second base. Do you have any thoughts on the two players, Rick? Do you prefer any one of them? Do you say whoever's cheaper? You're more of the I want the player and go. Polanco is still just 27, so maybe that fits in your mold.
Yeah.
Segura is older at 31. Is that the defining criteria for you?
Not the only defining criteria, but remember, we eliminate players so that we can get to a smaller number that we can attack. Okay, I don't see enough upside with either player. And I also see some issues with each player, playing time especially. So you're not sure what Polanco's role is going to be. And what if, let me just throw this out there. What if Scott Kingery plays second base and
Sure.
Baum plays third base? Gregarious is going to play shortstop, right? Hoskins first base. So what if Segura's kind of like the utility infielder because he can play second, short, and third? And what if he ends up playing 3 games a week or 4 games a week? Instead of 6. So his playing time could just get hit, and if he does, then there's a lot more upside at the bottom or even prospecting. Because remember, if you take a shot at a prospect and he starts and it doesn't work out in the first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, and you see it's not, you switch him out, and you'll be able to find middle infielders on the waiver wire, and or for Fab. I have been in the past at least.
Right. My only counter to that is, DJ LeMahieu 2 years ago on the Yankees. They said, well, where is he going to play? He'll probably play only 4 or 5 games a week because is he going to play short? He's going to play second. We don't know. But of course, a high skilled player usually wins out, and all it takes is one injury, and that's his playing time. So I caution that mentality totally, but I totally get it. Also, Gene Segura is older. It's different if someone is younger to come fill in. He is on the older side, so I tend to agree.
I have all these weird expressions. Okay, so one of them is hope is not a management strategy. So hoping for an injury isn't a management strategy. So that's not one that I would use.
Interesting. I'll go with trust skills, not roles, or that kind of thing.
Cool. But, that's cool.
Ruvain, any thoughts between the two?
Yeah, I'm a little nervous about Polanco. His barrel rate drop, his hard hit rate drop, his home run to fly ball rate drop. So unless I'm getting a big discount on him, then I'm not buying him. Segura, kind of the opposite. He had the highest career barrels. His launch angle went up. He had the highest home run to fly ball rate in his career last year. But people think Gene Segura, they think stolen bases. He's over 30. Once you pass 30, the speedsters tend to drop a little bit. You'll still get your stolen bases, and if he's not playing that much, listen, he may be the first guy off the bench as a pinch runner on a defensive replacement somewhere. If he is, then he'll get you more stolen bases than he will power. So I'm a little higher on Segura than I am Polanco, but I'm still cautious on both of them.
Yeah, there's no question that both of these guys have warts, but there's also a lot of positives. Polanco has a 16% strikeout rate for his career. That means that he's going to have a fantastic batting average. He's not going to drop off. Gene Segura, even without his stolen bases, hasn't produced an auction value of less than $8, and he's being drafted for way lower than that now. He has a career 14% strikeout rate, even better. So there's good points. Segura, I do worry about the stolen bases as he's older. Polanco, I worry some about the playing time as well. I would say this, that if you are in the mood for upside play, just as Rick said, these are not the guys you want in general. My feeling, though, is that they might be enough of a discount, maybe a 3-round discount from where they're going in the ADP, or an auction dollar equivalent of about $4 discount, so that if they are available a tad later even than the ADP, then they become very good bargains, right? Mm-hmm. It's hard for me to pass up on the singles. I don't feel like I need to hit a home run. If I hit 7 singles with my players, I'm going to score just as many runs as a home run or 2. So if I can get enough of a bargain, and it looks like they are on the cusp of getting that 3, 4, 5-round bargain, the $5 discount, they are going to be a good value for the price because there is enough elements that are stable in their profile to give you that. They're not exactly 5 category players, but they have enough of a showing in each category to know that they won't drop to 0. They're, as ATC speak, their intra-projection standard deviation are very low. There's not a lot of categorical risk between them, so they will produce a floor value. Whether you think that if you are looking for upside at position, great. And of course, it also depends if you're going through a draft. If you already have a highly risk team, if you have a low risk team already, do not take one of these guys. If you have a very high risk team above and you're missing that middle infielder position at that time, they're probably good to get you a bankable, somewhat floor level of stats. That's how I would play them. It's not a like or not. It's how can you use these players, if that makes sense.
It's fair. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, if you're going to get value, if you're going to bank some, you have to, subset of the roster spots have to have bankable stats in them. Ones that, that you can say, all right, these are the stats I'm going to get from them from this particular roster spot. And so if you're getting a bargain on somebody that you know is going to get stats when, the upside, the huge upside player who's, who you could grab who's going to get zeros, and you want to bank those stats because you don't have enough security in your roster, then those are great opportunities.
Exactly.
So
let's talk about Chris Taylor of the Dodgers.
We have to.
You know what?
I'm just kidding. I'm 6. I'm 6.
Well, tell me, what's your issue with Chris Taylor?
No, just these are we're getting to some of the kind of players that would never be on my target list.
Okay, fair.
Because at 30 years old, even though he could have 20 homers and 5 steals, he's not going to have enough counting numbers for me to prefer him versus somebody who, is a newer guy who's got a lot more upside.
Okay,
Or
okay.
or when I analyze the player pool, say, all right, I'm going to pay up then to make sure I don't end up with a Chris Taylor.
You prefer
You know,
Gavin Lux for this coming year?
no, that's not what I said at all.
No, I'm just asking
So
because I was trying to get
I
to a
think they're
board
pretty
bet.
similar, though.
Okay, because
I mean, I think they're. Oh, I see what you're doing.
I was gonna board bet you here, Chris Taylor versus Gavin Lux. If you want to take that, I'll take the Taylor side.
Oh well, no,
Okay,
no.
okay.
But how about if you want to board bet it in the middle infield? How about McMahon versus Garrett Hampson?
I don't want either. I don't want either of
I
those.
I'm telling you that I want Garrett Hampson for $1 at the end of my draft or $2 because if they cut him loose and he wins the job, which McMahon has proved he can't win, then he could have that 40 stolen base season, and you could get that for $2, and that could change your team completely. If not, you cut him and you pick somebody else up.
What about position? What about position eligibility? That doesn't play into it either because Chris Taylor can play second, short, outfield. These guys at the end, they can play everywhere and they can fill in spots when people get injured.
Actually, Taylor's only depending on what league you play. If you play normal league rules, 15 games, he's not going to qualify at anything but shortstop and outfield. You have to play modified rules to 10 or 5.
Yeah.
Okay. Then let's talk about a guy like Joey Wendell. He played 20 games at
Yep.
second. He played
hmm
28 games at third. He played 10 at short. So hypothetically, he can be eligible almost anywhere also. He's lower down on the list. He was on pace for 10 homers and 20 stolen bases last year. You have an issue picking him up? Does he? I mean, he's over 30. You
Yeah.
have an issue picking up?
How many RBIs is going to have? 40,
Yeah.
maybe 50.
ATC
50
shows 44.
runs scored.
44.
But he's a guy you can have on your bench. He's the guy. He's the last guy. He's the guy that's sub to put in when someone gets hurt. That's all. That's these guys that here. I mean, if these guys are your main middle infielders, then you have a real issue with your team.
Yeah, I'm taking Hampson. A shot at Hampson over Wendell because, by the way, Wendell's value over replacement is almost zero because I'm going to find somebody
I have
on the
Wendell.
waiver wire.
I have him at minus $3.6 auction value for Wendell, 44 RPIs. So I'm going to pass. I do want to point out about Wendell, though, and a couple of other people. Wendell, I have Isaiah Kiner Falafa, Nyko Goodrum, J.P. Crawford, just to rattle off a couple of guys that are below replacement level, meaning I would not draft them, but they will either be available for the bench or more likely on the waiver wire. And those are just a couple of names to know who can turn in. We're talking about 15 steals. They don't give you much else, but a lot of times you're looking on the waiver wire for a fill-in, and you need a fill-in for a certain category. So it's important to know the player pool.
Yeah.
And of course, middle infield we know is the source of, or at least we talked about it, is the source of some stolen bases. So just good to know a couple of names. Not to draft or anything. There's very little upside, but during the year, especially if they have a good schedule. They're playing at a good ballpark or against a crappy pitcher. Just a couple of guys to know to pick up for the week or two to fill in to know about the stolen bases.
I like Goodrum. I'm okay with him. I know he's 29 years old, or maybe he's going to be 30 this season. But I mean, he does have some pop in his bat.
Yes.
He could have 15 homers and 15 steals. He's going to bat 240.
Yep.
But to me, he's a player who hasn't been worn out yet. Like a guy he's a young 29. Kind of Falafa, I don't know where he's going to qualify. That depends on how many games again. If it's 15 games, it's only third base. I think if it's 10 games, I think he gets the qualification that everybody wants. And J.P. Crawford is just he's somebody I think that you can take a shot at better upside instead of him. Plus, I don't really know what that Seattle lineup is really gonna look like yet. So
Yeah.
I don't know what you think about that.
Yeah, between the four, I actually agree with your pecking order. I think Goodrum is probably the best shot at something, but J.P. Crawford is rosterable. J.P. Crawford, what he's going to give you is he's going to give you at bats. He's going to play shortstop for them. At least that is the plan right now. So from the start, if I had to draft somebody of the four, I would pick Crawford. During the season, from a waiver wire standpoint, it might be Goodrum to fill in because he'll also give you some of that power as well to go along with it, where some of these other guys wouldn't. Connor Falafa was a good value last year, but that, of course, was only because he qualified at catcher. I'm not going to say useless now, but his value is far lower. He's not as helpful to you anymore. Got a couple of questions from the mailbag, which we'll end with. Brian asks, in the early stages of a draft, when you're evaluating a pick and it's really close between a middle infielder and a corner infielder, do you lean towards a certain position for 2021? What say you, Rick?
And, I would be completely lying if I said that I had the player pool completely figured out first. But you do have to analyze the player pool in order to figure out where you're lacking. Sometimes it's first base, third base. Whichever is the most scarce position is the one you're going to want to go after. And it's clear to me it's not shortstop. So to me, if it's really close between a shortstop and a first baseman or a third baseman, then I'm taking the first baseman or third baseman. If it's a second baseman, I'm probably taking the second baseman.
Ruvain?
Up top, I'm probably going to be taking if one of the top second basemen are there, I guess you have to because the drop off is pretty steep. Shortstops, I'd wait, but I usually me and you, Ariel, we tend to go corner infield very early, and we tend to go middle infield late.
The real answer is that it doesn't really matter, because if you're doing your pricing correct, you're really evaluating. It doesn't matter what the positions are. You should be accounting for any scarcity, if there is any, within your evaluations. I will say though that for drafts especially, it's not just about who's available there. It's what the replacement is, meaning what I do is I work backwards. I take a look at who am I going to be getting later in the draft, in the 20th through 25th rounds? Who am I getting in the 15th through 20th rounds? And if you see that there's a large number of first basemen later in the draft that you think might be interesting, and there's fewer second basemen, well, that tells you what you need to do, right? It's the plan that you have for later. It's the foreseeing what you might do later on, and what the player pool looks like really tells you what to do up top. I think that's pretty much similar to what you said, Rick, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, yeah, you're looking at, and in my case, I'm looking for bigger upside. So, but still, it's the same kind of idea because you have a value, but my value includes the upside.
Right. So you have some risk-adjusted value or so. I would just caution, though.
That's a good way to look at it.
Yeah, I would caution though that just also depends. It not just depends on the position, but it depends on the stats. If that player up top is going to have is not going to have stolen bases, you don't want to be taking a middle infielder at that spot. You want a middle infielder to have some steals with you. So I would take the corner to leave room for a potential middle infielder later. So it's also balanced between the stats. Similar question from Alex, but he asks about later in the draft. When drafting your third middle infielder, meaning you've already have a second baseman and a shortstop, are you still bumping up second baseman at this point in the draft? For example, would you take Starlin Castro because he is a second base eligible player, even if there is a slightly better shortstop on the board? Similar answer, Rick?
No, I mean I'm taking the better player at the end of the draft, no matter what. So if when I'm filling in middle and corner, I'm not trying to figure out whether or not one of the players that I have is weaker at one position than the other. I'm taking the best player available and relying on the fact that I got it right before.
Yeah. Again, I have all my values baked in so that I'm indifferent between players. If a shortstop is better than a second baseman or vice versa, it's because I've already adjusted any scarcity in there. Then there's no question, right? You want to adjust values first.
It's fair.
Right. And by the way, just to give you a couple of metrics in terms of replacement level, I'm looking at some of the Z scores at the very bottom, the $1 players that you would get at the bottom. The middle infield position is at a Z score of minus 2.6 according to the player pool. Right. It's a negative thing. So all what I would do in calculating my values is all middle infielders get a 2.6 bump. Third base down to minus 3.3, which is similar to first base. Outfield minus 3.57. Outfielder is more scarce than all the other positions, right? If you need to bump up, you're going to be bumping up outfielders more because you're taking 5 outfielders. Catcher, of course, far lower. Catcher, we're talking about in the high 6s, so it gets a tremendous bump more than anybody. So this is very different than the player pool from 10 years ago, where you would see second base, shortstop probably with the lowest one, and first base with something that you don't have to bump. Very different how it's changed. You just have to recognize that that's what the player pool is, that replacement value, no, it's first base. And maybe, Ruvain, that's why you and I tend to take the first baseman, third baseman a little bit more, because we're adjusting values here much more for first and third than second base short, much more than the market. That's probably why. Do you think that could be the case?
I agree, but I also think that toward the end game of most drafts and most auctions, we are short the middle infielder for some reason. It always works out that way. We're always looking for the guy with the most steals because we usually find out that our team is lacking in steals. So I think that what we normally do is we look for the middle infielder with the most amount of steal potential, whether they're good or not, and it's a matter of whether we think they'll have playing time. If their playing time we see is there, and we think they're going to steal, usually we go for that middle infielder late in the draft.
Yeah, it's always okay, by the way, to have $1 players. If your second baseman is a $1 player, that's fine. You know, it just means that you have some more value elsewhere. It's probably better to be a little bit more well-rounded. But injuries happen. You're going to be replacing people at any position. So, I wouldn't worry so much about which position you're getting something for. I'd worry more about the plan as to where you can plan your most values. Ruvain, quick injury update for this week. Go for it.
Okay, I got 3 players, and I have a trivia question following the 3 players. First, I have Gio Urshela. He is expected to be ready for opening day. It was announced he had elbow surgery in December, and all systems are go for him. JT Realmuto was dealing with a hip flexor strain at the end of last year. He said he feels 100%. He should be good to go for spring training. And Kirby Yates, the potential closer for the Blue Jays, completed his rehab process and has already thrown a series of bullpens. He had surgery in August 2020 after some bone chips were discovered in his right elbow. Now, the trivia question that I have, we were mentioning middle infield and we're mentioning stolen bases a lot. The middle infielder who may be moving out of the middle infield to the corner infield and gives a possibility for stolen bases at a corner infield spot is Keston Hiura. He may be moving to second base because of the recent signings by the Brewers. Can you name, in the last 5 years, 8 first basemen who had more than 10 stolen bases in the last 5 years? Can you name them?
Can I name all 8? There's no possible way I could do this on the spot. But Goldschmidt comes to mind immediately.
That's one. One.
Votto comes to mind. He had 12.
Not 5 years ago. That was longer.
Longer than that ago. Rizzo.
Rizzo is one.
Bellinger.
Bellinger is one.
Well done.
Freddie Freeman, he steals some.
Freddie Freeman is one. Our good friend Will Myers is one. Danny Santana did it in 2019. Right. He was eligible at first base.
Okay, he's eligible.
Marwin Gonzalez did it back in 2016.
Okay.
And another former Brewer who had multiple position eligibility everywhere, who was not drafted anywhere, Hernan Perez. He did it twice, and he was eligible at first base. So those guys at the end, at the middle infield, you may not want them, but they may have some value in them.
Right. Most of those that on that list, though, are a combo. They have second base eligibility too, or Myers probably third base eligibility as well. But yeah, you're right. There are very few true first basemen in that list, which is, I guess, all the more reason that you really do need some speed. Some speed. You don't have to get all your speed from middle infield, but there should be at least one slot. And Reuven and I usually do it. That when we list our slots, we're talking we need a second baseman or middle infielder. We'll often write middle infield / speed, because that's something we're always looking for. Any last comments about the middle infield player pool, Rick? Anything that you've observed or tidbits, jokes, whatever?
Well, on my way to no. I'll say you said it pretty good right now. I mean, stolen bases are in the DNA of every fantasy player, so you got to pay attention to those. And if you pick them up from the middle infield, great. If you're not getting them from the middle infield, make sure you get a 30 home run guy. Don't not get stolen bases for a guy who gets counting numbers.
Well, this has been a fantastic show, Rick. Really want to thank you for coming on. And you can always listen to him with his partner, Glenn Colton, on Sirius XM Radio, 10 o'clock Eastern on Tuesday, I think.
Yep.
I know because I play tennis on Tuesday nights, and when I get out of tennis, driving home, it's Colton the Wolfman for me. And you always do a good job entertaining and information. You get fantastic guests on all the time. So I enjoy that, and thank you for doing this. For how many years has this been now?
I have been doing Colton and the Wolfman. We have been doing it for 9 years. It was season 9, episode 43 this past week.
Can you tell us where we can, everyone listening can hear you more, read your stuff, follow you on Twitter?
Yeah, well, I don't write anymore. I don't write very often, at least, because we have an amazing crew at fantasyalarm.com, led by the great Howard Bender. But just a fantastic team. I call them the family, the FAMILY. So we do have a great group there. So it's not necessary for me to write anymore. I write one piece a year for the draft guide in each baseball and football. I write a piece about knowing your projections and figuring out what your targets are for each different type of league. And for football, of course, I write the smart football column because I'm way more fantasy football than baseball, if you believe it or not. So you can find me at RickWolf1, or I'm readily available for access for anybody who has business issues or things in fantasy, because I really enjoy helping people build their businesses in fantasy much more than I do analyzing or broadcasting.
Awesome stuff. Ruben, tell us about your stuff.
You can follow me on Twitter at MLB Injury Guru, where I tweet out injury updates during the course of the offseason and during the course of the season. I also have a weekly article during season on Rotoballer updating injuries, and actually my first article will be coming out in the next couple of days.
Very cool. You can read my work over at Fangraphs at CBS Sportsline. I'm there. I know you were there before. I'm there now. And at Rotoballer as well. The ATC projections are now on a bunch of sites. They're on Fangraphs. They're on Sportsline. They're on Rotoballer. They're on RotoChamp. You can get them anywhere. Right now on Sportsline, all the ATC volatility metrics are up. They should be coming to Fangraphs really soon, and I'll be dropping a nice article about what they are, what they mean, how you can use them, and why. Incorporating risk into your pricing might be interesting. You'll see some correlation between more risk means less value. That's what we thought, and it is true for some players, and you'll find that out soon. Anyways, this has been a great episode. Thank you so much, Rick, for coming on the show. From all of us here at Beat the Shift, see you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Beat the Shift podcast presented by Fangraphs. Follow us on Twitter at beat_shift_pod.